Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. In this episode, we're taking a look at the final album from a rock trio that would also give them their only #1 hit. The group is The Police, and the album, Synchronicity. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff, and Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome to the 3324 podcast. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. You found us in our little corner of the internet, tucked away, hiding in our little hobbit hole, but you found us, so we're grateful for that. So thanks for joining us. I'm Dean, here with Eric.
Hi, Dean. Hi, everyone.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. And you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Fun fact before we get started. When we upload or launch our episodes on Thursdays, if you didn't know that, we launch them on Thursdays. I always go in and check to see who's listening and where the locations are. And first and foremost, there's always a person, I don't know who they are, but there's always a person in France that is always, they listen to every episode. They are the first listen that we have. So I don't know who they are, but I want to thank them for being they're always #1. I guess because of the time difference, they're actually getting it closer to when they would be up or be able to listen to it. So to that person in France, whoever you are, we thank you.
Thank you
for being #1 on our list.
That's crazy.
As for the rest of you, keep listening. Unless you want to get up really early in the morning to be #1 in the States, you'd have to get up pretty early, but it'll be there for you. You can sleep, get your rest, and then when you wake up, it's there for you.
Sure.
So we appreciate it. And as always, you can find us on social media, 3324 Podcast. That's on Instagram and on Facebook. We make it easy. It's so simple. We just keep the same login information, the same name, so you can find us. We're not trying to duck you. We're not trying to dodge you.
Making it easy. We're not going anywhere. So
we're not going anywhere.
That's right.
Especially not for a while. We're going to be sitting in these chairs until we're done talking about The Police and their album, Synchronicity. So let's get cracking on this. Let's get the stats rolling so then we can get the conversation rolling as well. This was released in June of 1983. Produced by The Police and Hugh Padgham. Hugh Padgham this is not the first time we've mentioned Hugh Padgham in an episode. The album hit #1, and there were 4 singles released stateside. Every Breath You Take, which, as I mentioned in the intro, that would be their only #1 hit.
King of Pain,
Wrapped
Around Your Finger,
and one more.
And Synchronicity 2.
Synchronicity 2.
Yes.
Absolutely. Synchronicity or Synchronicity also.
Part 2. Yeah.
Synchronicity also. And the album went 8 times platinum. So that's over 8 million copies. So this was a monster for the Police. Just a really big album. And it won 3 Grammys, including Song of the Year for Every Breath You Take. This was just a monster release. This was unfortunately, as I also said in the intro, it was the last album by the Police. Things had gotten really not in a good place for them. So the fact that they were able to eke this release out and have it do what it did for them, and then they literally, I don't know if you could go out on a bigger album.
No,
honestly,
absolutely not. This was an absolute. I don't know if they even knew that it was over. I mean, I know there was a lot of infighting. Stuart Copeland and Sting, didn't get along. They I think they fought more.
Came to blows.
Yeah, absolutely. But did they know that this was the end? I wonder.
I don't think so, because from what I understand, they had regrouped to start work on another album.
Yes.
Stuart Copeland had a horse riding accident. He broke his collarbone or something. So that kind of put the kibosh on everything. And then at that point, they realized that it's probably better if they didn't continue. So I think they were going to try and maybe force something or at least see what happened. Mm-hmm. But I think they were miserable. I don't think they were happy with each other. Sting was definitely pulling away.
Yeah, lyrically speaking, I think.
Lyrically, professionally, he was acting. He was doing he was really expanding into a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that the Police as a project could hold that anymore, or even as a side project where they keep the Police going and then Sting does other stuff. I don't know if they ever considered that. And that might have been a good outlet we keep the Police going and then we just revisit it when we feel like it.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, it was the tour. I read that they were in front of a stadium full of 70,000 people, and Sting decided pretty much right then and there that it doesn't get any better than this. So we should stop, which is interesting because, was he thinking of the Police as just a project? Did he think that we weren't going to get this popular? And they saw that they were just global, worldwide. And it's just, and I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. You gotta kind of respect that decision, I suppose, because, then it alludes to the idea that they're not just doing it to be famous or to be, huge in that respect.
Yeah. I think part of the reality is that they were never really friends or best buds, as it were.
Yeah.
It was always, it seemed like more of a working relationship. So there was I don't think any personal skin in the game where they had, and they were only around. I mean, they we're going to get to the brief, we're already into the brief history. So let's get into that.
Sure.
They were formed in 1977.
Yeah.
So by 1983, this was their last album. That's 6 years. So that's not really long for a band. No. And they had gotten 5 albums out of it. And in case if you don't know who we're talking about, well, you've got Sting on bass, you've got Andy Summers on guitar, and you have Stuart Copeland on drums.
Yeah.
And a very special type of drum also called the octoban, which he championed. And this album, Synchronicity, was the follow-up to Ghost in the Machine, which hit number 2 on the Billboard charts. So that was a success. This was the kind of the run-up. And Synchronicity would just blow the doors open, and they were actually kind of really two different kind of albums. And then Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 2003, first year eligible. Got in. That was going to be no doubt. There was no doubt they were going to get it. I don't think there was going to be any argument that the Police was not going to get in on the first ballot. I don't think there's going to be any fighting about that. So, So yeah, how did you come to this? What was Synchronicity there for you when it first came out, or was it a later thing?
MTV, I think, was promoting it at the time. I distinctly remember a music video that was specifically tailored to promote the album, and what it was like a little, like maybe 30-second snippets of every song. I don't know if you remember that. This was before they started even playing the video for Every Breath You Take. So yeah, but I had come to know the Police by Zenyatta Mondatta in 1980. I had that on vinyl. That was my first exposure to the band. Got into Ghost in the Machine. That was a monster for me, being that it was so different. Yeah, very proggy, and so of course I loved it. But Synchronicity is kind of a step up from that. I didn't think that Synchronicity would be as different as it is from Ghost in the Machine. I thought it was going to be a little bit more of the same, but it totally wasn't. It was a total.
I think you could take that record. Yeah, I think you can take those last 3 albums, Zenyatta Mondatta, Ghost in the Machine, and Synchronicity, and that pretty much I think will encapsulate the Police for you, because Zenyatta Mondatta kind of continues on what the first 2 albums were doing. I think it kind of refines it a little bit better and gets it to more of a razor edge.
It's a very safe album.
Ghost in the Machine, and Synchronicity, you've got a nice, and they're all 3 very different, like you said.
Yeah.
For me, I got into it 1 album later than you. I got into the Police with Ghost in the Machine. I was dating somebody at the time, and that's all it seems like she only ever played Ghost in the Machine and Fleetwood Mac Mirage. Seems like those are the only 2 albums that she ever played. So I got to know Ghost in the Machine really well. So that was really my first entree. I had known some of the other songs like Message in a Bottle. Those were kind of hanging around. But really my introduction to the Police was Ghost in the Machine. And that's a kind of, it's got that industrial, dark feel to it.
Yep.
Not industrial in like it sounds like industrial music, but it just has like that feel, like a dark feeling to it. It's not a light album per se.
Not at all.
It's a very well produced album, but it's got a lot of experimentation by the Police that they didn't really carry into Synchronicity. I mean, Synchronicity, as diverse as that is, I don't think shares a lot of DNA with Ghost in the Machine. What do you think?
No, not at all. I think Sting was really going for something real different with Ghost, and a lot of layering, a lot of overdubbing with his voice. There was a kind of an off. Some of the songs to me were just kind of like almost off key in a way, like on purpose. There were things that were being done that were just, it was slightly more punk. They were trying to do something, maybe something somewhat proggier. Stuart Copeland always said, I always wanted to be in a punk band, but the Police always did more than that. Mm-hmm. So we're actually prog. He considers the band a prog rock band because they were always doing something more than just straight up punk rock.
Yeah. And they've got roots in reggae as well.
Yeah.
So you've got to keep that in mind is the first couple of albums, the first 3 albums really kind of had the punk elements, and it also had reggae elements as well as pop. And Ghost in the Machine started to move away from some of that. Mm-hmm. Most of that actually for just a totally different sound.
It's definitely the, if you think upon them as a prog rock band, Ghost is definitely the prime example of it. Because there's some they got some really long, and there's some really long songs on the record. Demolition Man just kind of goes on forever and ever. And then you got Invisible Sun, which is unlike anything they've ever done before. This slow sort of building,
I think Rehumanize Yourself is the closest thing that would sound like it might have been on another album.
Yeah.
That would be the closest. And then they moved to Synchronicity, which puts them right square into the MTV generation with music videos as a thing. With Ghost in the Machine, it was kind of that every little thing she does is magic, and it was kind of like thrown together, like they're in the studio, spirits in the material world. It seemed like the stuff was just kind of thrown together. Mm-hmm. But with Synchronicity, they would be fully embracing everything that MTV had to offer. They would use Godley and Cream for a lot for directing a lot of their videos, and Godley and Cream were 2 members actually that were in the group 10cc. And then they struck out on their own, but then also were music video directors in their own right as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they were there pushing the Police, and each one of those videos for those 4 singles are very different, very different looks at the Police as well. Yeah, and I think that's what you get with this album too, mm-hmm. is to start talking about this album. The word that comes to mind, especially when we're talking about side 1 mainly, is textures. Yeah. There's the first side really has a lot of different textures to it.
Mm-hmm. You could almost, the album cover even reflects that. Sort of brush strokes of color. You have them doing all these separate things. And from what I understand, I think that they didn't know what they were going to be doing, when they were posing for the pictures. So they had the band separately doing separate things, and the band didn't even know what it was going to look like, which I find interesting. So when you say texturing, even the album, the artwork on the cover reflects that.
Well, since you brought it up, you're saving me a bullet point talking about the album. Is the album, not the cassette, but the album? I believe I want to say 36. I think there are up to 36 different variations of the album cover. Yep. With different color schemes, different sets of photos, different poses, different arrangement. Then the fun part is if you are a vinyl collector and you take out the album from the sleeve, it looks just like a regular LP. But if you hold it up to the light, there's actually different color variations, but it's not clear vinyl like blue. Oh, hey, this is blue. Hey, this is purple. on the surface, when you pull it out, it looks like a regular album. And when you hold it up, there's like a brown one and some different ones. And I remember when I was I bought a couple of copies of it on vinyl, and I'm like in the record store, like holding it up to the light.
Yeah.
They must have thought, like, what is this guy? Like, what does he think he's doing? But I needed to see, because it's not very translucent, but you have to hold it up to a light to get the color. Mm-hmm. So if you're into vinyl collecting, you can get 36 different Synchronicity covers, and then there's a couple of different variants of colored vinyl as well.
I wonder if anybody has ever tried to collect all 36.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure the police completists are absolutely. I'm sure there's somebody that's got them all. Absolutely, it's like Pokemon. Got to catch them all.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool, actually. To just something just to have.
Yeah, maybe put them on a wall, and all the different variations would be pretty wild.
And I wonder if you do that, if it has some kind of sort of, you know what I mean? Like it's like a piece of a puzzle or something. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but it's never been mentioned, but it would be interesting to see that.
Good question.
Anyway, yeah.
Good question. Well, if anybody out there has gotten all of them, let us know.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely. Sure.
Hit us up on social media and let us know. Or if you know if there's any secret hidden meaning to all of them, or if they match up somehow, some way, by all means, let us know. Mm-hmm. So let's jump into side one of Synchronicity. And like I said, this is the most eclectic side of the album. Side two kind of settles into a groove.
Yeah, I agree.
For the most part. And I think the first side is really where you get the most diverse, and in one case, very diverse type of music. So it starts out with Synchronicity 1. So there are two songs named Synchronicity 1 and Synchronicity 2. And Synchronicity 1 really kind of sets the tone. You're hearing something different from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Synthesizers are being employed here, but not in a way that you usually hear them with a lot of the synth pop bands of the time. It's just they didn't really know how to use them. Interestingly enough, I had just read that Sting was kind of just playing with it, so it was more about sequencing a series of layering a sequence of notes and that kind of thing. So it really starts out with this weird sort of synth kind of thing, which is, again, you've never heard this kind of thing before from them. And then it just kicks in with those drums.
Yeah, you got some big drums. You got some big drums starting this off and kicking it off.
With the help of Hugh Padgham, who you may know that he worked with Phil Collins to get that wonderful gated drum sound that he has. The same thing with Stuart Copeland. There's that sort of, I don't know, I can't describe the crack of that snare drum is so distinctive.
It's Stuart Copeland.
Yeah, it is. Nobody sounds like this. He has his own signature sound, which I think is incredible, Yeah. So, and just that driving beat just keeps the song going. It's really fast, really great song. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like it. I think one of the first times I heard it really loud, I was in somebody's car actually before, maybe, I think it might've been actually before I ran out and got the cassette, because I vividly remember getting the cassette.
Yeah.
And I think it was because I was in somebody's car and they played Synchronicity 1 and I was in the back seat and they cranked it. And I was like, whoa, like what, what is this? This sounds like, it sounded nothing like Ghost in the Machine. And I remember I had a job and I was like a cleanup guy, sweeping the floors and mopping. And I remember getting paid, getting on the bus, going to the local mall, which was, 25-minute bus ride, getting Synchronicity, and then coming all the way back home just to get it, to get my hands on it. And
I almost blew my eardrums out on my Walkman listening to that track over and over again.
Yeah.
I'd rewind it back, and I had, just the opening gets you. That when the drums kick in, I'm like, it gives you chills to this day too. I still love it.
Yeah, and not a lot of guitar on this song whatsoever. No. You don't really hear from Andy Summers in this way, and you kind of don't hear from him until usually, you hear him a little bit in the next song, which is "Walking in Your Footsteps," more as atmospheric, helping to paint the picture, which is
right.
This "Walking in Your Footsteps" really has a world music influence, flute sound and bongos, very sparse production and very sparse arrangement, just really, really the opposite of Synchronicity 1 in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And again, his guitar is very effectual. It's very just sort of like little brushstrokes, again, that texturing that we spoke of.
Yeah. And the thing about Andy Summers, I was thinking about is, as a soloist, he kind of seems like almost his solos just generally seem very chaotic. You know, his rhythm playing and his support playing is kind of very standard when you listen to him supporting a song. But when you listen to Andy Summers solo, it doesn't sound like a regular, like I was trying to think of, I'm like, I couldn't compare him to someone else that solos. It's very manic.
He's
very
not going,
chaotic.
He's not going for melody. He's not going for necessarily, it's a different type of emotion. I think he's trying to,
it's more of a feel and it is more of a punk aesthetic.
Yeah. Yep. And the only other guitar player that I could probably think of that does stuff like that is maybe in a sort of more prog vein is maybe somebody like Robert Fripp.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably
say, oddly enough, they work together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's, they're from the same
fight
sort of
to be who could be weirdest.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed in this particular song is Sting talks about it's about, one of the lines is, if we explode the atom bomb, would they say that we were dumb? Mm-hmm. That seems to be something he revisits in his solo work, because in 85 he would release his first solo album, Dream of the Blue Turtles, and there's a song Russians on there. Yeah. Which also talks about nuclear war. So it seems like he was developing also more of a social conscience. He was doing a lot of charity stuff and those kind of those different causes. And it seems like that was starting to also infiltrate into the music.
Both him and Stuart Copeland were very political. And apparently that's one of the things they never got along. They just have very different ideals and politics. And I don't really know what Stuart Copeland believes in. I frankly, I don't care. It just, that's one of the things that they just never got along on. But interestingly, I think I heard a story where Copeland would argue with Sting outright. Sting would just basically shut down, couldn't respond, get up and leave. And then the next day he'd come back with like a little haiku of lyrics just to, and floored Stuart Copeland as a response to that argument. And he would just write down maybe 3 words, and Stuart Copeland was floored by it. And that was the dynamic that they had in terms of, you could say that was a great working type of relationship, oddly enough, because it got the most out of Sting. He would go back and come back with these like really great lyrics and not even, and very simple lyrics too. They weren't so like, complex but it was just broken down, just simple words, but they made
responses
a lot of sense. Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
So,
and so after that, we've got My God, which is one of my favorite. I really like this song for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
I like Sting's vocal on this. Got a little, he kind of has a little bit of a growl or a little rasp to his voice in it.
Yeah.
The bass work on this is really good. And it's kind of it's got a little jazzy feel to it.
Yeah. It's an old song. I think he had wrote it when he was in, I think, his first band, I think. And it's for whatever reason, they never used it. But yeah, it's a fairly old song. And it kind of makes sense that it would be, because he has that real high pitched voice in this song. So evoking the early days of the band. And I always thought it was at the end with that crazy saxophone playing. I always thought it was Stuart Copeland, and it's Sting.
It's Sting.
Yeah, because he had done it. He'd played sax on Ghost in the Machine. He was experimenting on wanting to play sax for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I think he plays oboe as well. I think this is also a foretelling of Dream of the Blue Turtles as well. This is, if you're really paying attention, this starts to point in that direction.
In that jazzier.
Yeah, because nobody was ready for Dream of the Blue Turtles when it came out. We were expecting Police solo stuff, just Sting.
Yeah.
And Dream of the Blue Turtles. If you've never listened to Dream of the Blue Turtles, My God is kind of pointing at you could see where he's going.
Yep.
And I think it's the only, besides Murder by Numbers, I think those are the 2 songs that really kind of point in that direction. Everything else is kind of in the Police wheelhouse.
I love the liner notes of this album. The best thing that they wrote was all noises by the Police. It's not, they didn't break it down, bass, drums, whatever, who did what, it's all noises played by the Police. I just love that.
Somebody did something. Somebody grabbed an instrument and got it done.
Yep.
And then speaking of noises,
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh
Andy
my God.
Summers.
Here we go. Oh my God. Here we go. The next track.
We have My God, and then the next song is Mother, and it's Andy Summers wrote it. All these songs were for the most part written by Sting, except for Mother and Miss Gradenko, and then some of them were co-written. But but Sting pretty much has the lion's share. And Mother, Andy Summers really has just a totally different take on things, and you can hear it in some of the past Police albums too. He's kind of the odd duck when it comes to it. And this song, if you can get past this song, you can get through the rest of the album. This is the odd man out.
You need a song like this, though.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it kind of, it anchors it to, it has just the right amount of weirdness. What do you even call it? I mean, I don't know if it's pop or whatever. It's undefinable. It has like
a hurdy-gurdy, like swirling sound to it, Mother. The vocal is unhinged. It's a manic vocal, so it's not anything like there's not anything else on the album like it. So it is very, you might say it's experimental for, as far as if you put it in with everything else that you're listening to on this album, very experimental. His vocals are very creepy in one aspect, and kind of manic and throaty in another.
And he's just screaming and
it's got the swirling.
I guess you could call it
invitation.
Avant-garde, I guess.
Sure.
I don't know, maybe something to that effect. I'll
go with it. That's exactly what it is.
And I do you know? Do you think it's a response to John Lennon's Mother song? Mother?
You know what? I never thought of that,
because I think I had read that too. Like
I never thought of that.
There was some kind of a comparison or something going on there. And, John Lennon's song Mother is kind of, when you think about it, he does get like that in the song. He starts screaming and
absolutely.
So I wonder if this is just
interesting,
a take or somewhat of a take, but he wrote it himself, which is, I don't know. Interesting. So
very kind of crazy and manic type song. And then you get the next song, Miss Gradenko, which was written by Stuart Copeland. Settles back into
very catchy,
kind of very poppy, very catchy. Yeah.
Yep.
Just a standard kind of something, again, something akin to you might hear on another Police album, perhaps.
Very. And I think the song, I think is somewhat political. I don't know what it's real. I don't even know what it's about. But it's definitely a political type song. But I love it's also the shortest song on the record too. It just wraps up real quick. It's just a little ditty thrown in there. And again, to just change things up. I love the way they change it up in the middle of the side with these two songs. They just, and then you kick into The Monster, which was
literally, lyrically.
Yeah.
Lyrically, which is Synchronicity 2.
In this light little ditty. And then all of a sudden you hear again, this like weird sort of synth kind of thing. And then boom, and again, it's not fast like Synchronicity 1, but it has that power to it. It has that those drums kick in, and then boom, it goes off. I think it's my favorite track off the record, Synchronicity 2.
I'd go with it. It would be a strong number 2. I love Andy Summers' work on this track. I love his guitar support on this with the lines that he's playing when Sting is singing, and then just his riffs, I love that kind of stuff. It's really, it really kind of anchors the song. What I didn't know, which I found out recently, is that originally Synchronicity 1 and Synchronicity 2 were supposed to be linked. The songs were linked, and they were supposed to be, because in Synchronicity 2, there's some contrasting between a guy and his work life and his home life.
Yeah.
And then this thing, basically the Loch Ness Monster kind of coming to life. They were trying to work in the Loch Ness Monster somehow, or reference in Synchronicity 1. And then they were also trying to link them musically, and they just couldn't figure it out. Like they couldn't get it to match. So they ended up splitting it, which is probably good. I like that it's two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
That they are two very different songs. So you're kind of getting Synchronicity 1 to open the album, and then 2 to close out the side.
Mm-hmm.
And this was what it was, a big song and a big music video. This is when they're in all those tattered clothes. This is like the height of like 80s MTV. music video.
Yeah, the wind blowing, the hair blowing, like Sting's hair is like you know.
I don't want to say debauchery, but meaning meaning of overspending money and just making this gigantic video. Yeah, they're all in different like towers and they're wearing tattered clothing and
all this debris flying around, and it's starkly lit. There's like, you know, this is
like
cinematic.
One of the pinnacles of like the MTV generation videos was like Synchronicity 2.
At least we thought so back in the day.
I think so. Still, I think when you think about that video, you think, wow, like if you could look at the other videos they made for the other songs, and they don't. You could say, well, that's not really too 80s-ish.
Yeah,
but the video for Synchronicity 2 is squarely like the fashion, the tattered, and Sting's hair, like the hair, and just the bigness of the set and everything. Just they spent a lot of money on that.
Yeah,
they absolutely did. So that closes out side 1, and like I said, side 2 is really much more of an even keel.
I think so. And
I think they find a groove and stay in it.
And I think the songs are more personal too. I think they evoke, you know, they're talking about relationships, and you know, they're getting real. Like it's not, you know, there aren't really many. I don't think there are any political songs on side 2.
No, but definitely more. I mean, it opens with Every Breath You Take.
This was more.
The hit.
Yep.
This was their number 1 hit. This was the one that brought them to the stratosphere, and you hear it. It's in commercials nowadays,
and it's funny too, because it's just such a simple song, and one that Sting was really meticulous over, and Stuart Copeland wanted, obviously being the drummer that he is, wanted to do more on it, and Sting was like, no, I want this beat, and that's it. and if you saw these two together, and you know that Stuart Copeland is that kind of drummer, he's gonna want to do more, because he's got that ego, and he knows that he has a very distinctive drumming pattern and sound, and so that when they clash. I mean, Sting knew what he was doing. Obviously, you know, he knew enough to say this song has to be restrained. It's a very particular thing I want, and you know, so that must have been hard for Copeland to kind of just,
definitely needed more of a delicate touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Less is more,
as opposed to I think the second side is definitely more sedate. Than the first side. The first side definitely is manic. There's a lot of up tempo and strange stuff. And the second side really kind of lays you in and sets you up with Every Breath You Take. You get the next song, which is one of my favorites, is King of Pain. I just really love this song. It's just a great one. It's great lyrics.
Again, simple too. Yeah, that simple little piano riff in the beginning. Yeah, I think it evokes, you know, this is what Sting would go on to do later in his solo career. These types of songs, these kind of, you know, putting a lot of himself into it, and just they're very personal, and they you know, they're jazzy or they could be poppy, but very, very intelligent. He goes, you know, he has this brain, like he can either go real personal and talk about love and breaking up, talking about literature in the song and all kinds. It goes off on all these weird tangents.
Yeah,
I think the side really evokes those types of songs that he would go on. When you think about it, it makes sense that this would be their last album as a group.
Yeah, actually,
Sting is already rising above, you know, the group dynamic.
Yeah, he was expanding his ideas, and I think that's what I was getting to is when you said, you know, kind of echoes what he would be doing. Yeah, for some reason, you know, the first song that came to mind when you said that was "Fortress Around Your Heart." I don't know why. When you know what I'm talking about. Like Fortress Around Your Heart is kind of a similar feel. Doesn't sound the same. Kind of the same type of evoking the same type of emotion.
How do you talk about love, and then you throw in a sort of a political thing in there as well? That's Sting. I mean, he was able to do those kinds of things, those sort of cross-pollination of just all these different ideas, and very, very gives you the sense that he's a well-read individual, but also getting the reputation of being slightly pretentious, which I didn't mind, because
can't have one without the other.
There's nothing wrong with that, I think. But that's Sting, you know, just it's this sort of arrogance about him. He's like this, you know, he's above the punk thing.
Why don't we call it self-confidence?
Well, yeah, okay.
Let's call it self-confidence. or arrogance or ego.
Most definitely
any
is.
or all of those.
And he owned it. I mean, he did. So who didn't want to be Sting? I know. I mean, I looked up to the guy. I mean,
of course. I mean, they were gigantic. They were on the precipice. I mean, at the time of this album, they were the biggest thing. I think they were the ones that also unseated Michael Jackson's Thriller from the charts at the time too. I think this spent many weeks at number one, not necessarily sequential. It would hit number one, drop back, and then go back up again. So this was really just a monster album, and something so totally different from Thriller or anything else that was going on too. I mean, if you look at these songs, honestly, when I was listening to it, I'm like, the material that these songs deal with is not necessarily like happy thoughts. It's not like they're total downers, but the songs are up tempo, but the subject matter isn't necessarily about happy things, really, when you look at it.
Well, every breath you take, let's retread some water here. It's not, everybody uses it as a wedding song at the time, and Sting would laugh at this because that's not what the song's about. It's actually a very, very dark, very dark song.
Definitely.
It's about a guy stalking or just sort of a voyeuristic type of thing happening, and just, the behavior of the individual or the characters in the song. It's not about two people falling in love. It's about some guy trying to control someone, and
maybe that's why people are choosing it for their wedding song.
Maybe, I don't know. But
like, I'm wearing the pants now.
and then you have, and then we talked about, and then of course with King of Pain, it's, it's dealing with things in your life that go wrong, and and it's just taking that on your shoulders, and at least that's the interpretation I get. It kind of hits home in some cases. Maybe not at the time, but when you go through some things, it's definitely a part of the soundtrack of your existence, I suppose.
And then Wrapped Around Your Finger, which again kind of it's the same type of feel. Especially King of Pain and Wrapped Around Your Finger, I always think of them in tandem. Not that they sound the same, but they just have the same kind of feel about them, and
similar, and it says they pretty much saying the same thing.
So I really like the arrangement on Wrapped Around Your Finger.
I love it.
Stuart Copeland does get to do a little with his little cymbals, and
he's very talk about texture. He puts in these little percussive moments, especially that little. I just love when at the very end of the song, he gets in that little flam at the end, like, what I'm talking about, like when the song starts fading out. And then, they're doing the little dee, and then, and he just gets it in there at the very end. And it just maybe almost as an FU to Sting, I kind of like to think of it that way. Just to get it in there because I'm Stuart Copeland, But that's one of the great things about him is he kind of reminds me of John Densmore, and it's no coincidence, right? That Stuart Copeland would actually play in the Doors of the 20th Century revival group, and same time, Densmore always reminded me of the same type of thing, always going for feel or going for those little extra add-ins and just little pieces, and Stuart Copeland kind of does that more to the nth degree. He really has, those sensibilities of, and again, sometimes you need to rein it in. And that's, like with something like Every Breath You Take, you don't need all that extra stuff. But on a song like Wrapped Around Your Finger, those little extra things really help kind of grow the song and make it an interesting listen too. I remember that little video store right next to Genevieve's, to talk about that that was when we first got our,
next to the drugstore.
Yeah. The VCRs and we would rent
video rental store.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of it? The store?
Not offhand.
Okay. Yeah. We would go and I must have rented the Synchronicity concert VHS, I think 3 or 4 times. I would keep it beyond the expiration date because I just kept watching that thing over and over, and I was so fascinated watching Stuart Copeland. This is when we were all taking lessons, and me wanting to be a drummer, and of course the aspirations, and watching him with this huge rig, especially on Wrapped Around Your Finger, and he had all these cymbals like kind of spinning around, and he's doing all of these things, and he's wearing the white gloves, and he's hitting the xylophone and this, and all these textural things, which I thought he's the first real drummer that introduced me to the idea that it's not just about a kit or a straight beat.
Yep.
It's percussion too, which I find very fascinating too.
Yeah. Now let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you still owe the late fees from those rentals?
My parents, unfortunately,
put the parents on the hook. That's the way I would have done it too.
No, because it was done. It was put on their credit card or whatever.
There you go.
So they had to. So that they would get angry with, what do you mean you didn't take it back? But then I just rent it again. I take it back, and then I'd rent it a few days later, and then I might as well have owned the damn thing. What
do I want to rent? Something new. Hey, how about the Police Synchronicity tour? And if you don't rewind it, you could just probably pick it up and put it in, and it'd be right where you left off too.
Yeah.
So
but it was more about it was because I was studying everything Stuart Copeland was doing. I just love the way he looks when he drums, and he has a very he holds the stick,
very lanky.
Very light, but he holds the stick like the old style jazz drummers used to on the finger, and just hitting it from working that hi-hat. Nobody could work a hi-hat like Stuart Copeland. I mean, Peter Gabriel used him specifically on Red Rain, him and Daniel Lanois, and so they hired Stuart Copeland just to play the hi-hat, not to play the drums on the song, but just the hi-hat, because they wanted that extra little something, which I thought was interesting.
And like I said in the beginning, he was also used a style of drum called the octoband, which are, if you don't know what those are, you can look it up, but they're very small, long cylindrical drums.
Right. Yep.
And you get a really distinct sound from it. And there are a lot of artists that use them, but you can really hear, he used them to really great effect in the Police. And it really kind of helped define the Police's sound too, with those octobands. So check out, go search for them. Yeah.
They look like hollow tubes, almost look like, like something you would pack a poster in, maybe a little bit thicker
almost
than that.
Bongo-y.
Yeah,
a little bit,
but
struck with the stick. So, which leads us to Tea in the Sahara, which has no drumming like that on it.
It's very light. It's very light.
Atmospheric.
Yeah.
It was inspired by a book called The Sheltering Sky, and the Sheltering Sky does as a lyric appear in this song as well. Just a lot of textures. Just very low key, some bass in there, and just some atmospheric guitar. Oddly enough, we were talking on one of our earlier shows about our top 5 TV shows, Eric, and you mentioned how Miami Vice used music. This song was used in the first season of Miami Vice.
That's right.
So that was right in that, we talked about, right in that wheelhouse of Miami Vice, embracing the 80s aesthetic, but also getting the rights to using new songs as they came out. And to use Tea in the Sahara is kind of would be a very curious choice. I mean, you'd want to go for a hit.
Right.
And they're going way deep. I mean, they're going beyond deep cut.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beyond deep cut. What I didn't realize is that on the album, that's it.
That's it.
That's the last song. By the time I got to Synchronicity, I was well into buying cassettes and getting away from buying vinyl and 45s, etc. So there is one more song called Murder by Numbers. Which they got into, became a big thing with cassettes, as they would start throwing on an extra track at the end.
Yeah.
Which a lot of groups started doing. And I didn't realize, and then I'm listening to the vinyl, I'm like, where's Murder by Numbers? Where is it? And it's like, I'm looking, it's not there.
It's not there. Yeah.
But it was on the cassette. So Murder by Numbers, we will talk about. Again, a very jazzy number. Probably the most
very odd thing. And a very odd drum pattern, a signature on the song. It's just so not in sync with what the rest of the band are doing, right? I mean, Copeland's on a whole different thing with this thing, and it works though. It absolutely works. But yeah, it's kind of a corny little tune, but it's a little
loungy, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of loungy, and it definitely sounds like it definitely has bonus track written on it.
Yeah, to me, it's like it's
not a throwaway, but
it's right.
But
so
it's
another song called "Once Upon a Daydream," I believe, was supposed to be on this record too, and that's a very synth heavy song, and that was one of the outtakes of the album. And they did put out an album when they re-released all of their albums in a box set recently. And they're all remastered, and there was an extra CD full of all the songs that did not appear on various records, which I loved. And then they released it separately. So Flexible Strategies is the name of it. So it's very interesting stuff there. There's a couple of instrumentals. They have, some of the outtakes. And one of my favorite songs was I Burned For You from the Brimstone and Treacle soundtrack. And that's the only song that's not on this record. I'm like, what are you doing?
Technically, was that Police or was that Sting, though?
No, it was the Police.
It was? It was a Police proper song?
It was a Police proper song, yeah. Yep. Because, Copeland is all over that. I mean, his drumming on that when, especially towards the end when he, and it just keeps going. And he's just, filling in with all these flames.
Now you'll have to go get the soundtrack LP.
Yeah. I mean, I had
Brimstone and Treacle with Denham Elliott.
Sting playing basically the devil. I don't think I've ever seen the movie.
I did see the movie in the theaters, believe it or not, and I didn't get it. And I went to go see it probably because Sting was in it. I go, I'll go see this, and it was just weird, artsy thing, which he would do. He did, as far as acting, very curious choices. He was in Dune. He was in the remake. He was in that movie called The Bride, which was basically a remake of Bride of Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
So his acting choice, he definitely could have movie star looks and leading man looks. He definitely could. Oh, no doubt. Could probably have carried a film, but his acting choices were very curious.
Yeah,
and he really went like the artsy stuff, and that's probably what hit his sensibilities. Is I like this kind of strange and weird stuff that I want to do. Wasn't he in Quadrophenia?
Yeah, his first role was the face man in Quadrophenia, the character that everybody looked up to. He was the slick guy, the leader of the mods, the long coat and the hair. That's when he dyed his hair like really blonde, I think. But yeah, he also I always thought that he would have made the perfect Lestat in the
Interview with the Vampire,
the vampire movie. Tom Cruise. I mean, everybody was kind of scratching their heads on that, but I thought Sting would have made a perfect Lestat.
Would have been interesting,
or David Bowie, one of the two.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Sting
definitely.
But this is the thing.
He had the looks.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I was so obsessed with the Police at this point that even anything that came out solo wise, any soundtrack work, anything like I had Stuart Copeland's Rumble Fish soundtrack. Never saw the movie until recently, like about a year ago, when I bought the Blu-ray, and I had never seen the movie.
Yeah, well, that's okay. You were into the music, though. I mean, you bought it. You bought it for the music.
I bought it for very specific reasons. Yeah, he also had another thing called the Rhythmatist, which is basically him going around the world recording different tribal people using percussion, and then he would layer his own stuff on top of it, which I thought was great. Obviously, probably one of maybe two people that own it in the world. Like, it's obviously a very bargain bin type thing. It didn't sell. It wasn't that kind of an album, but it was a real departure from what he was doing with the Police. But I dug that kind of stuff. I love artists who go above and beyond. Now he's like composing like classical music, which I find great. In the middle of playing in all these different types of bands like Oysterhead, and there was one like just a couple of years ago that they put out, Gizmondo, I think it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like the traveling Wilburys of prog rock, right? It was Stuart Copeland. You had the guy from Level 42 on bass. You had some Italian,
Mark King.
Some Italian composer, keyboardist, and then Adrian Belew of King Crimson. So it was, and that was a pretty wild album. I was like, this is kind of cool,
Yeah, and like I said, he also did the Doors. He sat in with the Doors too. So he's had an eclectic career. Mm-hmm. Andy Summers would go on. Basically this would, after this album, they would splinter. They did try and regroup. They did that. I don't know why they redid Don't Stand So Close to Me 86. Like that was pretty much the last thing.
Yeah.
Thing that we heard of. And I think that came from the session when they were trying to get things back together and figure out what they were going to do. But that was a misfire.
It was.
I don't know what the reason for it was. That was definitely rooted in the 80s. Like the Police were not a product of, they were around in the 80s, but they certainly weren't influenced. I would not say they were influenced by what was going on in the 80s, except for that.
Mm-hmm.
That thing. That was a stinker. I'm sorry.
And that was more, that sounded to me much more like a Sting type solo type thing too. I think it was kind of Stuart Copeland, as you say, probably wasn't even playing on the song. Because it doesn't sound like Stuart Copeland. Like it's like he's like electronic drums on it. Yeah. That's not Stuart Copeland. I'm sorry. I mean, yeah, he's in the video. He might have had some kind of something going on, maybe in the studio, but this was not.
Well, I think the video was just the three of them standing, and they were just
yeah,
spinning.
they were just
so that, you know what? They probably didn't even in the same studio when they did it. I'm sure that it was over by then. So they would move on. Sting would go on to a monster successful solo career.
Yep.
I mean, it would just kind of, you know, with Dream of the Blue Turtles, once people got used to the direction he was going in, I think they were all in. You know, I think after Dream of the Blue Turtles, Nothing Like the Sun, which was a great album.
I love
it.
You know,
Soul Cages. I mean, he, 10 Summoner's Tales. I mean, he really hit a pretty consistent stride of he was kind of really defining what he was doing, and it was consistent at that point, and you kind of were able to kind of settle in and know what he was doing. And then the Police would say, "Oh, there's money to be made." So they would get together.
Like a lot of bands decide that at some point.
And I was excited. I remember when I was like, "Oh my!" I missed the Police. Right, that was one of the ones. I was like, did not see the Police.
Right,
first time around. Police are getting back together. Okay, I remember like checking like how much tickets, $300. Forget it.
Right. Yeah.
Pass. I'm not paying $300. I'm sorry. I'm not a cheap person by any means. But I was like, I can't justify this. No. And they were miserable.
They weren't enjoying themselves. You could definitely tell. It was something that was just, I don't know, for whatever reason, if it wasn't just to make money, I don't know, but
it was. It was the 30th anniversary of the band's formation in 2007. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Sting at this point was so far removed from what they were doing, I think. And it shows, because if you've seen a lot of the or you've heard the live album Certifiable, or if you've seen videos on YouTube, it's just the songs are so lackluster, very, very slow. They're slower. There's they're doing some interesting things, but as musicians, for what they were and the energy that they had, you need that for these songs. You need to go back there, and they just did it. It was
they
more
were going
like
through
Sting.
the motions.
It was like Stuart Copeland and Andy were backing Sting. Yeah. That's what it felt like, and he wanted it that way. He's like, I want to do it this way, like this arrangement. And of course, you could see the fighting happening, like, F you Sting, and walking out, and it's just sad to see. You don't want to see that. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, we're big fans of all of these bands that have this.
We seem to end up talking a lot about these guys fighting at the end, and
Fleetwood Mac and the Who,
Van Halen.
It's sad.
We haven't even gotten to Styx. So we're saving like Styx for like the granddaddy of all animosity fights.
Right. It's kind of sad, but we love these very
we could do a show on
people.
We could absolutely do a show on we just call it animosity.
Yeah.
And
no doubt.
Animosity and acrimony, we could call the show, because that's what it could be, is about these bands that don't do like REM, where they realize and they sail off into the sunset and said, let's end this on a high note. Let's go out like that. The Police did go out on a high note, and I think the intent was to do something. They just, their personalities, egos, whatever, just didn't match. It was just not, it was not in the cards, right? And they put out 5 spectacular albums. Sting, known as a premier bass player, although if you go listen to our top 5 bass players episode, Sting is honorary number 6 for both of us.
Yeah.
He didn't make the top 5.
I
thought he would be in Eric's top 5, and I predicted he would be. And if you listen to this episode, you would think Sting would be there.
Here we go.
But he as a bass player, he didn't make the cut. So, and for me too, he was pretty close for me as well. So we both agreed that he would be the honorary number 6 of our top 5 bass players. And he really is. He is a fantastic bass player.
Sure.
Really has a feel, can get into the groove, and especially for what the Police were doing. When it's a trio, you need everybody contributing, and he really was one of those people back then that really brought the bass back up to the forefront too, as well as a lead instrument. really kind of opening up and doing things with it. So I appreciate everything that he had done.
Yeah.
And his bass playing. He doesn't really play as much anymore. He's more of a multi-instrumentalist, guitar,
the lute. And those albums that he made, Old English stuff. I don't know about that, but it was interesting. Very interesting.
You got to keep yourself busy.
I had the Christmas one. I had the winter one. He was doing some like Old English type Christmas stuff on it, which is kind of nice. Very traditional. But I couldn't make heads or tails of the album before it when he was doing that. Playing with the lute but hey, whatever floats your boat. I mean, he, like I said, he's
eclectic. That's what he is.
Most definitely.
Yeah. He started out as one thing and was able to grow. And that's one of the great things about watching the Police, again, especially from Zenyatta Mondatta to Ghost in the Machine to Synchronicity, is you really see him really kind of grow and prosper as someone who kind of understands what they want and really starts to take the band into different directions. Ghost, like I said, Ghost in the Machine is something totally different. And then Synchronicity, it really doesn't take any of the themes from Ghost in the Machine, I don't think, but it gets you something totally different and totally accessible. And all those albums are great. And that's one of the great things about the Police.
But I think that's why, he decided, I think it was Sting himself who decided, look, this is maybe it's an ego thing, maybe whatever, however you want to look at it. But I think it was more or less putting it on the band. I don't want the band to do what, I don't want to treat the band like they're session players. Like, I don't want, you know what I mean? I want, we're equals.
He wants to do what he wants to do.
And I have to do it on my own.
And not impose it. Yeah, not impose it upon them and say, it's my way or the highway.
That's right.
And it seems like they're all going in very different directions, because Stuart Copeland would take a different thing. Andy Summers would do some soundtrack work as well.
Summers couldn't wait to get the hell out of that band.
Wasn't he like the band leader for some talk show too? Or like Chevy Chase or somebody had a talk show. Wasn't like Andy Summers like the band leader?
Yes, he was actually. Oh my God.
I can't remember who it was.
What was it?
I can't remember who it was.
Oh, geez.
Somebody had a talk show, and he was like the band leader and it was like 1 or 2 seasons and it was done. I don't know. Andy Summers as a band leader, I'm not sure, because he's just so out there that I don't know if people could follow what he was doing.
Yeah.
But so they all had vibrant careers afterwards, doing, obviously, Sting the most notable. Do They Know It's Christmas, and all of his charitable work that he's done as well, his philanthropy. So he's definitely has had activism in his veins since the beginning, even going back to the Secret Policeman's Ball.
Yes.
Which was a charity. That was one of his first solo appearances.
That's
as
right.
Well.
Yep.
So he goes way back with that kind of stuff. That's always been a through line too, as with politics. And you can hear that more notably in his solo work.
Yeah, he's an activist for the environment. He's, apartheid. That was a big thing, especially in the 80s. So, and he wrote songs to reflect it.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's going to do it, I think, for Synchronicity. It's definitely one of the ones that we both love, and it's a very eclectic album. So if you're looking for something different, you can't go by the singles. So if you know that, and there's 4 hit singles, but there's some other stuff in there too. So don't think you're going to get the same thing over and over. If you know the 4 singles, you are in for a treat then if you haven't listened to the album, because it is something totally different.
That's right.
Very, very eclectic, sometimes strange, right? Sometimes a little head scratching, but always definitely going to engage you. And that's one of the great things about it. And such a swan song that they go out on such a high note too, which doesn't always happen. A lot of bands go out with a whimper. So we thank you for staying with us and tuning in. We appreciate you checking us out as well. We're on social media at Instagram and Facebook at 3324 Podcast. So check us out there. A lot of posting that we do. We do live shows as well, where you can interact with us, and we interact with everybody that shows up. We love doing that. It starts a lot of great conversation, and we have a lot of fun with. So we encourage you to check us out on Facebook, and you can see when we schedule those. And until next time, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 Podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at @3324podcast and on Twitter @3324p to join the conversation.